I ain't never gonna get a chance to fight the best there is. And you know something? I'm better than him. I ain't never gonna get a chance.
Some movies become classics. Raging Bull became a legend because everything behind the camera was just as brutal as what happened inside the ring. A director on the verge of quitting, an actor willing to risk his own life, and a forgotten boxer's story that almost disappeared forever. This is the extraordinary journey behind one of Hollywood's greatest masterpieces. First, Martin Scorsese nearly walked away from filmmaking forever. Most people assume Martin Scorsese started Raging Bull as one of Hollywood's hottest directors. However, the truth was far darker. By the late 1970s, Scorsese was physically exhausted and emotionally broken. Years of relentless filmmaking, combined with personal struggles, had pushed him to the edge. He was hospitalized with serious health problems and quietly believed his career was over. Hollywood no longer inspired him. It simply drained him. Then Robert De Niro walked into his hospital room carrying Jake LaMotta's autobiography, the same book he had been urging Scorsese to read for years. De Niro refused to let either the story or his friend fade away. Sitting beside the hospital bed, he made one last passionate argument. This wasn't just another boxing movie. It was a story about guilt, obsession, self-destruction, and redemption. The room was silent. Fluorescent lights reflected off the white walls. The worn autobiography rested on the blanket while two longtime collaborators discussed what might become their final project together. But that wasn't the biggest surprise. That single conversation didn't just rescue Raging Bull. It revived Martin Scorsese's career and ultimately changed the future of American cinema. Second, Robert De Niro was the only person who refused to give up on the film. Hollywood executives weren't excited about Jake LaMotta's life story. To them, it looked like another boxing drama with little commercial appeal. However, De Niro saw something nobody else did. After reading LaMotta's autobiography, he became obsessed with bringing it to the screen. For years, he kept returning to Scorsese, pushing him to direct the film despite repeated rejections. Producers lost interest, studios hesitated, even Scorsese doubted the project. Behind the scenes, script pages piled across tables. Coffee cups sat untouched during endless late-night discussions. Every setback only strengthened De Niro's determination. Few people realized that Raging Bull existed because one actor simply refused to let it die. Without Robert De Niro's relentless persistence, one of cinema's greatest masterpieces might never have been made. Third, Jake LaMotta sold the rights to his life story for surprisingly little money. Most fans imagine that a former world champion would earn a fortune from Hollywood. The reality couldn't have been more different. By the time studios showed interest, Jake LaMotta's boxing career was long behind him. The fame had faded, and the spotlight had moved elsewhere. Instead of demanding a huge payday, he accepted a modest deal because he wanted his story to live on, even if he didn't profit much from it. A simple contract rested on an ordinary wooden desk. No photographers crowded the room. No reporters waited outside. Just a former champion quietly signing away the rights to the most painful years of his life. Everything changed after that. That humble signature eventually opened the door for one of the greatest biographical films ever produced. Fourth, Robert De Niro gained nearly 60 pounds to become Jake LaMotta. Many actors rely on makeup, prosthetics, or camera tricks to portray aging. De Niro chose a far more extreme path. After filming the boxing scenes, production shut down for several months. During that break, De Niro traveled through Europe, eating enormous meals every day until he had gained nearly 30 kilograms. When he returned, even members of the crew struggled to recognize him. His tailored suits barely fit anymore. His face became noticeably heavier. Walking across the set left him breathing harder than before. He didn't just play an older Jake LaMotta, he physically became him. The real surprise came later. That extraordinary transformation established a new standard for method acting and inspired generations of performers willing to sacrifice their bodies for authenticity. Fifth, Martin Scorsese genuinely feared Robert De Niro might die. The dramatic weight gain amazed everyone on set. But behind the cameras, it terrified the director. De Niro had gained weight so quickly that Scorsese became increasingly concerned about his health. Simple movements looked exhausting. Between takes, the actor often sat quietly, struggling to catch his breath while the crew watched in silence. Every additional pound made the performance more convincing, but also far more dangerous. Bright studio lights illuminated the aging boxer. Cameras stood ready. Makeup artists waited patiently. Yet many people behind the monitors shared the same unspoken fear. Few people realized how close dedication came to becoming disaster. De Niro's willingness to risk his own health gave Raging Bull an authenticity that still astonishes audiences today, creating one of the most unforgettable performances in the history of cinema. Sixth, Raging Bull was filmed in black and white for a very unusual reason. Most audiences assume Martin Scorsese chose black and white simply as an artistic statement. The truth was far more practical. At a time when colorful boxing films dominated theaters, Scorsese wanted Raging Bull to feel timeless, as if viewers were watching forgotten newsreel footage from the 1940s and 1950s. Black and white also softened the shocking appearance of blood inside the ring, allowing the violence to feel emotional instead of graphic. Harsh lights carved deep shadows across Jake LaMotta's face. Sweat glistened under the spotlights while every punch echoed through clouds of smoke. Each frame looked less like a movie and more like a memory trapped in time. That bold decision gave Raging Bull a visual identity that remains instantly recognizable more than 4 decades later. Seventh, no two boxing matches in the film were ever shot the same way. Most sports films repeat the same camera angles from one fight to the next. However, Scorsese refused to let that happen. Instead of treating each bout as another boxing sequence, he designed every fight to reflect Jake LaMotta's changing emotional state. Some matches feel explosive and chaotic. Others become slow, lonely, and almost dreamlike. The audience isn't just watching punches. They're witnessing Jake's mind falling apart. The ropes shook violently. Flashbulbs burst through the darkness. Gloves crashed together as the crowd dissolved into distant echoes. Every fight carried its own rhythm, its own heartbeat. But that wasn't the biggest surprise. The boxing wasn't simply action. It became visual storytelling. Eighth, the boxing ring secretly changed size throughout the movie. Few viewers ever notice it, yet the ring itself becomes another character. As Jake's confidence grows, the ring appears wide and open, giving him room to dominate his opponents. But as jealousy, rage, and paranoia consume him, the space quietly shrinks. The ropes creep closer. The corners feel tighter. Every step becomes more suffocating. Bright lights hovered above the canvas while thick shadows swallowed the edges of the ring. Jake seemed trapped inside a cage built from his own emotions. Everything changed after that. Without saying a single word, the set itself revealed the collapse of a champion's mind. Ninth, the camera was placed inside the ring to make every punch feel real. Most boxing films keep the audience safely outside the ropes. Scorsese wanted exactly the opposite. His crew pushed bulky cameras directly into the action, capturing punches from angles rarely seen before. Blood sprayed toward the lens. Sweat flew through the air. Every collision felt immediate, violent, and painfully intimate, placing viewers shoulder to shoulder with the fighters. The camera shook with every impact. Flashbulbs exploded around the ring. The roar of the crowd faded beneath the sound of breathing and cracking gloves. Few people realized how revolutionary those images were. They forever changed the way filmmakers would shoot boxing scenes. 10th, Joe Pesci was virtually unknown before Raging Bull. Today, Joe Pesci is remembered as one of cinema's greatest character actors. Back then, almost nobody knew his name. Robert De Niro noticed Pesci in a small performance and believed he was perfect for Joey LaMotta. Scorsese agreed, despite the risk of casting an unknown actor in such an important role. That gamble paid off beyond anyone's expectations. Pesci stormed onto the set with raw energy, matching De Niro scene for scene. Every argument between the brothers felt frighteningly authentic, as though years of resentment had been building beneath the surface. What happened next surprised everyone. Raging Bull launched Joe Pesci's remarkable career, opening the door to unforgettable collaborations with Martin Scorsese that would shape Hollywood for decades. 11th, Kathy Moriarty was only 18 years old when she became Vicky LaMotta. Most viewers assume Kathy Moriarty was already an experienced actress when she stood beside Robert De Niro. The truth was astonishingly different. She was only 18 years old and had almost no professional acting experience, standing across from De Niro. Already regarded as one of the greatest actors of his generation, would have intimidated almost anyone. Yet Scorsese saw something special beneath her inexperience, a natural presence that couldn't be taught. The set fell silent before emotional scenes. Bright lights reflected in Moriarty's eyes while De Niro remained completely in character. Every take demanded confidence from someone who had barely stepped onto a movie set before. But that wasn't the biggest surprise. Her remarkable performance earned an Academy Award nomination, instantly transforming an unknown teenager into one of Hollywood's brightest new talents. 12th. The real Jake LaMotta actually appeared in the film about his own life. Many biographical films keep their real-life subjects far away from production. Raging Bull chose a different path. Jake LaMotta visited the set frequently, watching Robert De Niro recreate the most painful chapters of his life. Eventually, he even made a brief appearance in the finished film, quietly stepping into the world that had been rebuilt from his own memories. The cameras rolled. Crew members stepped aside. Standing only a few feet from De Niro was the real Jake LaMotta, the man whose triumphs, failures, and regrets had inspired every scene. Few people realized how surreal that moment truly was. Reality and cinema merged together, giving Raging Bull a level of authenticity few biographical films have ever achieved. 13th. Raging Bull was almost considered a box office failure. Today, it is celebrated as one of the greatest films ever made. However, audiences didn't immediately agree. When the film premiered in 1980, many moviegoers expected an exciting boxing story. Instead, they found a dark psychological portrait of obsession and self-destruction. The film earned strong reviews, but disappointed at the box office, leaving many in Hollywood wondering whether the project had been a costly mistake. The theater lights came up. Conversations were quiet. Ticket sales never reached the heights the studio had hoped for. Everything changed after that. Time would prove that opening weekend doesn't always decide a film's destiny. 14th. Robert De Niro's extraordinary sacrifice earned him the Academy Award. Countless actors have transformed themselves for a role. Very few have done it with the commitment De Niro displayed in Raging Bull. He mastered Jake LaMotta's fighting style, adopted his voice and mannerisms, and completely reshaped his body to portray the boxer across different stages of life. Every bruise, every exhausted breath, and every emotional breakdown felt painfully authentic. The audience watched a proud champion slowly become an aging man haunted by his own mistakes. There was no trace of Robert De Niro left on the screen, only Jake LaMotta. The real surprise came at the Academy Awards. De Niro won the Oscar for Best Actor, cementing the performance as one of the greatest achievements in film history. 15th. Decades later, Raging Bull was recognized as the greatest American film of the 1980s. When it first reached theaters, few people imagined the legacy it would leave behind. Over the years, critics, filmmakers, and historians returned to the film again and again, discovering new layers of emotion, artistry, and psychological depth. What once divided audiences gradually became a benchmark for cinematic excellence. Film schools studied its editing, directors borrowed its visual language, actors admired its fearless commitment to authenticity. Generation after generation discovered that Raging Bull was never just a boxing movie. It was a portrait of pride, jealousy, love, and self-destruction. That lasting influence secured its place among the greatest achievements in the history of American cinema. Raging Bull endures because it never glorifies victory. It exposes the cost of it. Every frame carries the weight of sacrifice. Every performance feels painfully human. And every creative risk still echoes through Hollywood today. More than 40 years later, its story continues to remind us that the greatest battles are often fought far beyond the boxing ring, far beyond the boxing ring, far beyond